a few minutes before 2:15, so maybe we'll just hang out here. Anybody has anything they want to interject into chat, feel free to do that. Alice is going to be monitoring chat and alerting me if I need to respond to anybody. I would like for people to understand what I'm saying as we're going along and not hold questions for the end. But if I say something that's confusing to you, pop something into chat and we'll clear it up right then and there. Somebody's waving a hand I see up in the corner. I don't know what that means. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to hang out here till it comes around on the guitar and get started at 2:15. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dick Margulis. I've been helping people self-publish their books since 2004. I started setting type in about 1959, started editing about then too. So I'm old, be gracious. I discovered a long time ago that I'm good at following procedures, but I'm bad at following orders, which is why I work for myself and why I focus my business on working with self-publishing authors instead of being part of a stable of freelance editors at the beck and call of the publishing house. The relationship I foster with clients is that of professional consultation, and I encourage you to do the same. To that end, in this session, I'll provide a comprehensive and detailed summary of the steps and skills entailed in producing a book that meets commercial standards. Armed with this knowledge, you can guide your client toward intelligent decisions about who should do what. The self-publishing author is a publisher. Publishing a book is a business activity. Making a book is a craft activity. Self-publishing should not be do-it-yourself publishing. You can partner with others to produce the book so that the self-publisher can focus on marketing, sales, and distribution, which is their proper role. So what do I mean by commercial standards? I mean a quality that is suitable for commerce, not necessarily for a museum. If you want to make a book by hand type, printing it on a hand-operated proofing press on hand-scraped vellum, and binding it yourself in goat leather, this isn't your session. But if you want to make books that can sit on a bookshelf and look like they might have been published by Random House, stick around. As I said, making a book is a craft activity. When you understand the steps needed to produce a high-quality book, along with the skills and resources that it takes, you can make informed decisions about what to do yourself, what to bring in another professional for, and what compromises you can make to stay within your client's budget. So who are the clients? For the first three categories on this list, figuring out who is going to read the book is a non-problem. These are good categories to work in, and they're not what comes to mind when most people think about book publishing. The other two categories carry with them the idea of selling a book to the broad public at a profit. That means the client should be focused on how the book production schedule and budget fits into the overall marketing plan for the book. I'll say more about that in a minute. Something to keep in mind about clients, something that comes up in online editors groups all the time, is that your client is not your boss. You are an independent business person offering a service for a fee. A client has silly ideas. You need to be able to disabuse them of those ideas and lead them toward the light. When a prospective client says, it only needs light proofreading, you should not get all flustered and bemoan the fact that it needs more and poor me, what shall I do all over Facebook. You are the publishing professional in the relationship. The client is an amateur who knows much less than you do. Doctors don't let patients misdiagnose themselves and prescribe the wrong medicine. Good doctors don't. Be a good doctor, but unlike a doctor, you can turn someone away if they're going to make trouble. Trust your gut. So there are questions when you first encounter a client. How will the book be distributed or sold or not? What's the budget? Is there a marketing plan? I'm not a marketing consultant and I don't need to know the details, but I want to know that the person has thought beyond, oh, I'll list it on Amazon and people will discover it, or I'll get it into Barnes & Noble. I'm not interested in taking money from someone who's going to come back later and blame me for the fact that we didn't sell any books. The late Dan Poynter, the grandfather of the modern self-publishing boom, at least as it relates to nonfiction, made a couple of key points. He advised authors, and this is something you can pass on to your clients, the first thing you should write for any book is the back cover copy. That tells the buyer what they're going to get out of the book, and if you write that first, it will inform the process of writing the rest of the book. You'll know who you're writing for and what they want to learn from. The other point he made is that the worst place to sell a book is in a bookstore. There are a bunch of good reasons for that statement, but for our purposes, it helps sort out the clients with a realistic plan for their book from the dreamers who are unlikely to find a market. Is the client an author or a writer? So I make a distinction that's different from what some other people make. To me, an author is somebody who has subject matter expertise. They're an authority on the content, story to tell. They have a point they want to get across. They have pictures they want to share. That's the author. The writer is somebody who is a craftsperson. They understand the writing craft. They're conscious about what they're doing with their sentences. Most authors are not writers. So then it becomes your role in that situation to take care of the wordsmithing, the crafting. Is this someone you can work with? Is this a phone person versus a phone phobic person? Or same for you, are you a phone person or phone phobic? Are you going to be able to relate in terms of communication? Will they respect your availability boundaries? If you say, look, I'm available from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and they call you Sunday at 7 p.m., maybe that's not the person you want to work with. So somebody who pushes your buttons. Do they belittle you or bully you? Do they tell you offensive jokes? Your own definition of offensive. I'm hard to bother, but you may be more sensitive to some things. What's the schedule? Does it fit in your calendar? Are they flexible? Are they inflexible? You have to see if that's going to work. Are you okay with the content? Is it triggering for you because of your particular history, whereas another editor will be fine with it? Or does it cross a boundary in terms of public safety or public health to the extent that you think the police need to be notified? They're all things to consider before you sign a contract. Speaking of contract, chances are your client hasn't been a publisher before and will need your guidance through the process. One area you want to talk about before you even begin is legal responsibilities. While you're not a lawyer, as an editor, you have a sense of the kinds of questions that arise. Are there elements such as images or quoted passages, especially epigraphs, that will need written permission? Do you need to bring a permissions editor in? And lyrics, you can't use lyrics, right? Are there questions of potential libel or invasion of privacy? Those are two separate issues. If so, you'll want to insist that a publishing lawyer get involved, and you'll want a strong indemnity clause in the contract. And by the way, indemnity only counts if the client has assets. Being indemnified by a pauper doesn't protect you. Is the author offering advice in an area that is subject to licensure, such as financial planning, law, or medicine? Even if the author has the credentials, what kind of disclaimer will be needed to avoid liability? What do you do if you discover plagiarism or copyright infringement? How does your contract protect you in that situation? If you haven't thought about contracts before, you've been meaning to write one but haven't gotten around to it, this book may give you the kick in the pants you need. Actually, it came out of a talk Karen Cather and I gave at a conference a few years ago. I just crossed 1,000 books on Amazon today. More questions. The marketing plan drives the production schedule and the production decisions. How many books are going to be printed? Are they going to be printed? Is it just going to be an ebook? Those are all questions you need to know before you start working with somebody on what the final product is going to look like. How many pictures are there? How many of them are in color? That affects printing decisions. Once you know how many books you're printing. Okay, deep breath. What kinds of binding? What's the budget? All those things you need to know ahead of time. All right, enough of the overview. I'm going to talk about the editing workflow. I have a bunch of skipped slides here because I'm switching to a different screen. There it is. Okay, so give you an overview. This is a poster I published, and you can buy it for 20 bucks. But in the meantime, I'm going to go through it with you because it's a full workflow of how a book gets produced. And this is something to share with authors. First thing, of course, is they have to write the book. And there are some tips here on things to talk to them about. You a plotter or a pantser? I'm a pantser. I can't write an outline to save my life. I've never been able to. Any course I ever took that required writing an outline, I did not do well in. But here's the process. The author starts with a concept. You're seeing this, right? Yes. Okay. Starts with a concept, writes the book, has a draft manuscript, and that's the point at which they engage with you. Maybe. Probably it needs a developmental edit. That may be the same editor who does the later stages, and maybe a different editor. It's going to go back to the author, and they're going to revise it. Revised manuscript is going to go to either you or a different editor for line editing and copy editing. Copy editing and markup. Okay, traditionally, copy editing was a production stage, not a literary stage. You didn't, as a publisher, you didn't hire people from Sarah Lawrence and Bryn Mawr to be copy editors. You hired them to read the slush pile and eventually grow up and become book editors and take clients out to lunch. It was after the book was edited at that level by the people who had majored in English literature that it went into production. And the copy editor's job was to do all the Chicago Manual of Style stuff, all the house style stuff, enforcing the rules, marking up where the commas go, what's an M dash, what's an N dash. Remember, people were typing on a typewriter. They didn't have M dashes and N dashes, they had hyphens. They didn't have italics. Somebody had to underline and mark something to be italic. So the copy editor did that for the typesetter. That was the purpose of copy editing, was to mark up copy for the typesetter, so the typesetter knew what was supposed to happen. What's a bulleted list? What's a numbered list? What gets indented because it's a reduction? What's the chapter number? What's the subheading? Those are the things that the copy editor was responsible for, and a lot of that is stuff that modern copy editors don't know about and don't want to do. I've had any number of people on the Facebook editing groups who say, oh, I can't be bothered with styles. I don't want to learn about styles. I don't want to know anything about how Word works. I just want to edit words. Well, that's fine, as long as you're saying I'm doing the line editing. As soon as you say I'm doing the copy editing, you only do the style. You only do the punctuation and the capitalization and the word choice. You're still line editing. You're really not copy editing until you also do the markup. So that's an important stage, and without that, everything else falls apart, because you cannot rely on the person who's going to be doing the typesetting to read your mind. I'm an editor, so I can usually figure it out. But a lot of people who claim to be book designers are not book designers. They are graphic designers. They're great at designing a book cover, but they don't know anything about punctuation or spelling or type. So they just kind of pour stuff into a template, and you get what you get. So that's something to keep in mind. After the copy editing, the author reviews it. You go back and forth with the copy editor on that, and then it goes to layout. The next thing that happens is the designer gets it, hopefully a book designer, takes the design brief, which is the author's expectation of how many books are going to be printed, where's it going to be sold, who the audience is. Takes that information, sketches some ideas, produces some design concepts in consultation with the author or publisher or the editor or all three. Selects a concept to refine, goes through that process. Now you've got a manuscript that's been sent to layout, and now you've got a design that's been sent to layout, and those two processes can happen in parallel. Now the compositor, the typesetter, the designer, whoever, whatever title that person in that role chooses, has the final edited manuscript that's been marked up, has the approved design, and now they start pouring the content into a template that they've created, lay out the pages, refine the layout, check for widows and orphans, check for the left and right page balance, all that sort of thing. They produce loose pages. The editor or the author or the publisher reviews the layout, comes back to get revised. Once it's revised, we have something called type pages, where it's pretty close to what the finished product is going to look like. That document goes both to the proofreader and to the indexer, if there's an index, obviously. The indexer produces an index manuscript. The proofreader produces a corrections document. Indexing, this is the traditional approach, where the index is done from finished pages. If the book A is going to have an index and B is going to be published as an ebook, and if it's important that the ebook have a working index, then really the indexing has to be done at the manuscript level as an embedded index. That's a specialized skill. Indexers charge more money for it. It delays the whole process. So that's something to talk about if you want to talk about it. But typically, the index is created by an indexer from finished pages, comes as a Word document. Here's the index. It's a Word document. Now that's got to be produced. So the author reviews the index manuscript, reviews the corrections, makes any final changes. Those get incorporated into the book, including typesetting the index. And then we follow this dotted line over to here. And we have to work on the cover. But sometimes the cover gets done first so that it's available for marketing. So again, these are parallel processes. Let me zoom out again. So there's a manuscript process, there's an interior design process, and there's a cover design process. And they connect on these dotted lines, but they can operate in parallel in terms of timing. Look back at the cover. Sorry if you're getting motion sick from all this. The cover starts with a design brief. What are the author's ideas for the cover? What are the publisher's ideas for the cover? What are your ideas for the cover? The designer sketches some of those ideas, selects a concept, refines the design. This may involve bringing in an illustration from Illustrator, or photograph, or stock photo from one of the stock photo sites, or it may just all be typography, whatever the design is. It gets approved. And then there are all these other pieces that go in the cover. The publishing imprint. Well, if you worked with your client to create a publishing imprint, somebody has to design a little bug for it, a little logo, colophon. So the publishing imprint, the imprint logo, the barcode, the price, the shelving category, that little line up in the corner that says biography or U.S. history or mathematics, so that the bookstore clerk knows where it goes. Now, 99% of the time, this book is not going to be in a bookstore, but it's something that we expect to see on the back of the cover to make a commercial looking, professional looking book. So we go to the trouble, get the BISAC code for that. The author photo. There's copy that goes on the front, there's copy on the spine, on the back. There's flap copy if it's a hardcover with flaps, dust cover, dust jacket. All that has to go through copy editing, because if the cover is coming from the graphic designer, I promise you there will be spelling and punctuation errors. Or they'll get the author's name wrong, or they'll copy the title wrong. So copy editing is involved in making the cover. All those pieces get integrated into the cover. The design gets reviewed. And zoom out again. After all of this is done, so you've got the design, you're going to adjust the spine width for each printer, format the files for the printer, send the files for the printer. Are there more printers? No, you're done. But after all of this is complete, then the final finished, proofread, corrected, indexed book goes into ebook production. Because if you do it any sooner than that, then you have two different books you have to make corrections in. It's much easier to make them in the print book first and then send it off to have an ebook. So that's the overall plan. And let me see if I had any more slides here to share. Yeah. So go back to find the right. There it is. So talking about design, we went through the workflow, but now I'm going to talk about what's involved in all. There's 6 design modalities. There's book design, which is the interior design and typography. We talked about that. There's composition. That's the person who actually lays out the pages, usually the same person as the book designer, but not always. Illustration. Book designer might do some of the illustration. There may be illustrators that get hired. Photographers. So there's illustration. There's the cover artwork. Cover graphic design, putting it all together so that it actually works when you send it to the printer, and they don't send it back to you and say you forgot the spine. I've seen purported cover designs that done by other people that the author sends to me, and I go like, you've got a front and a back, but where's the spine? So graphic designers don't always have their feet on the ground in terms of the practicality of what it designs. They'll do a beautiful visual, but then what? And then cover production, making it. So talk a little bit more about book design. The goal of good typography is to allow the unencumbered communication of the author's meaning to the reader. I don't want anybody looking at a book that I've done and say, oh, isn't that a nice font? I want them to be in a conversation with the author. When you say you're a book designer at a party, people look at you and say, nobody designs books. It's a common response I get. And that's good. there's an essay called The Crystal Goblet. It was a speech given at an event in the 1930s by Beatrice Ward, who was the typographer that, well, she was the public relations person for the English Monotype. And she gave this speech called The Crystal Goblet. You can look it up. And she talks about when you want to taste wine, you don't want it in an engraved gold vessel. You want it in crystal so you can see the color, and it's not in the goblet, doesn't get in the way of the wine. That's the same thing with book design. You want the communication to be transparent between the author and my other great insight is Word is not a page layout program. Don't try it. It's very inefficient and it does a terrible job. So I've left enough time for Q&A, I hope. Yeah, we've got 20 minutes. What do you got for me? Anybody else?
I haven't actually seen too many questions. Somebody asked about elaborating on the Bryn Mawr history. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Elaborating on what?
Brynmawr, that history.
Oh, yeah, I'm old. So back in the Mad Men days, when I worked on Lexington Avenue, excuse me, the common practice, sort of the cultural norm, was that publishers, the big New York publishers, every year just grabbed what today would be called interns, basically, underpaid English literature graduates who wanted to get into publishing, and they exploited this desire. They were all women. They exploited this desire, and they had these people at ridiculously low wages reading the slush pile. Nowadays, manuscripts come in through literary agents. Back then, manuscripts came in over the transom, and they would just hire all these people, young people, and there might have been a couple of men involved, but mostly women. And those would be the people who would take books from unknown authors and manuscripts from unknown authors and look at them and say, this is garbage, and reject it. Or they would say, okay, this may be something that I should put up to my boss, who's going to tell me whether we're going to publish it or not. And then they would draw the task of working with the author. They wouldn't be working with a best-selling author, because that would be a senior editor. But these raw recruits would be working with an unknown author and working on doing what you do, development editing and line editing, and trying to make the manuscript better. And then eventually, if they were good at it, they would get a promotion and they'd get a raise, and then eventually they'd become book editors. But they really did come from the Northeastern women's schools, small liberal arts women's schools, none of which are women's schools anymore. Maybe a few of them still are. But that was the culture at the time, and I'm not going to try to defend it. It was an exploitive system.
Somebody else has asked, do you have any tips for working on books in a series?
Do I have any what?
Tips for working on a book in a series.
On a book that is, I didn't get
in a series, like a series of books.
Oh, a series of books. Yeah, there's some efficiencies there, because once you've designed a template, And once you have a style sheet as an editor, you can use that style sheet for the whole series. Once you have a template as a designer, you can use that template for the whole series. So there are some efficiencies there. You want to do them hopefully one at a time so they can be released sequentially rather than trying to get all the money up front and do the whole series before you release one. Hopefully they can sell some books and fund the subsequent books. But that would be the only thing I would say about a series.
We have just hit time. I'm not sure. I don't see any other questions, but I'm sure folks may come up with some. And thank you so much for the excellent talk.
I have flabbergasted. Well, hopefully. I sort of wanted to just outline the process because so many people are very confused about it. And people I run into in Facebook editing groups, like they don't seem to know where copy editing fits into the process.
Or proofreading. There's often the argument about what is proofreading. That is a conversation I have had.
Oh, and yeah, proofread. No one needs a light proofread. Yeah, okay, fine. What I want from a proofreader, we should talk about proofreading a little bit. What I want from a proofreader is not re-editing the text. If the text needs to be re-edited, then that should have been done before it comes to layout.
Yeah, proofreading, in my understanding, is like the quotation marks facing the right direction, or ensuring, like, if there's a minor typo, things like that.
Well, minor typos or even egregious typos, egregious misses. Copy editors miss stuff, and sometimes it's something important that's just not in the copy editor's consciousness, but the proofreader is. Excuse me. But what I want is from a proofreader, as the book designer, as the typographer, what I want from a proofreader is to tell me if I missed a widow or a runt, or if I left off a folio, a page number.
Or if the heading font changes abruptly halfway through the book. I've done that to myself where I had the wrong font and the wrong chapter header.
Yeah. So I want the proofreader to be looking at the typesetting. It's too late for the proofreader to be looking at re-editing an awkward sentence. It happens. I mean, they'll catch something that was just a dead miss. It was Noah Webster. It wasn't Daniel Webster, which was. I took the first copy editing test I ever took. Maybe the only copy editing test I ever took. Now that I think about it, some employment agency in New York sent me over to Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, to take a test, copy editing test, copy reading test for Prentice Hall. And I went over there, and the test was given in the employee cafeteria, and there must have been 40 people sitting at tables taking this test. And it was just a piece of potted prose that you were supposed, just a potted story about the first American dictionary to see how people did marking up this short passage. And I was very proud of myself. I went through it very quickly, and I got everything. I was absolutely positive I got everything. And I was the first person to stand up and walk over and drop my completed test in the box on the table and stroll out the door. And as my left foot crossed the threshold on the way out of the cafeteria, I slapped my forehead and said, "It was Noah Webster, not Daniel Webster." They did not call me back.
Oh no, yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for all that excellent information. That was a lot to digest. It was excellent. It was a very familiar workflow to me, so I can identify with it. It was absolutely lovely, and thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you very much. And
I misread my clock. We're until 3 o'clock, but if anybody has any questions, yeah, please ask. I'm not very. Apparently, I need more caffeine.
alrighty.
So, does anybody else have any questions regarding the talk or anything in it? You can either put them in the Q&A box or put them directly in the chat. Yes, we do all need more caffeine. I think folks might be digesting, like the contents of the talk.
Okay, I will disconnect, I guess.
Actually, I do have one question for you.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any recommended books or reading for folks who might be wanting to learn typesetting? And a question just came in, but I'll give that to you after.
Well, yes. I think the first book I would suggest to somebody is The Elements of Typographic Style by Robert Bringhurst. It's a good way into understanding what a book page is, what it's supposed to look like. If you don't know what the goal is, it doesn't matter if you learn the tools. So that would be my first recommendation. Elements of Typographic Style, Robert Bringhurst, very well written. He's
Excellent.
in addition to being a typographer, so he writes very gracefully.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the question that came in was from Alexis Miller. For copy editors who want to do the actual markup, how do we identify outdated advice versus things that still apply today? I want to learn and practice more of this type of copy editing.
The main thing is to learn about character styles and paragraph styles in Word. If you can master that and apply them consistently so that every paragraph has a style and there are no manual overrides, you don't type Control I or Command I to make italics, but you actually select the italic character style. If you learn how to do that, how to create styles, how styles relate to one another. Styles are just tags. It's all they are. They're just it's meta information about the text, and it guides how the text looks in Word. But it doesn't really matter. That part doesn't really matter. The text in Word can all be 12-point Courier new, and with no styling at all. But if you attach tags for character styles and paragraph styles, those get transferred automatically over into InDesign. And then the designer takes those labels and designs what they're supposed to look like on the printed page. So that's the main aspect of copy editing that people typically are not doing and should be doing.
Somebody is asking, Connor wants to know, what softwares do you recommend for self-publishing?
Well, I don't recommend software. I recommend hiring people to help you self-publish a book. Again, the publisher's job, the self-publisher's job, is marketing and sales and budgeting. And they should be hiring us as professionals to do the work. So InDesign for the layout, there are other free, cheaper and free software, open source software for doing layout. I use InDesign.
Affinity Publisher is a recent up-and-comer that is an equivalent to InDesign that has most of the same functionality, if not all, but doesn't have the subscription. It's $50, I think, for the software, and it is truly tremendous. I switched from InDesign to that recently.
I'm going to look at, well, I don't have subscription software. I have Creative Studio 6, which I paid for, and I own it, and they can't take it away from me. So, yeah,
I understand that. Let's see. Ratika wants to know, has there been a time when you had to choose between needing the income a job would bring and the client bringing that job insisting on a level of editing that was not appropriate for the manuscript? How would you navigate that?
that was came through a little muddled. Could you just say it again? Ah, yes. I don't tolerate that. You know, if somebody comes with red flags and I can't negotiate them away, I'm not going to do it. Uh, but you know, because I'm that kind of guy. I don't cower in front of clients. Um, I just say no. You know, if they say this is what I want, damn it, do it. They're micromanaging. They're bullying. I won't tolerate that. Of course, you know, I'm 6 foot something and almost 300 pounds, and so people kind of turn tail and leave. I'm mean. What can I say? But no, I won't do. I won't do that.
I think Ritika is asking because she has had to balance whether or not she needed the money from a job desperately. Like, how do you? Uh, is it just a?
We have to eat. Um, you know, but one of the things I tell people, especially people who are starting out and haven't established a business yet, is that you are not an editor. You are a person who wants to edit for a living. You're a person first, and you need to eat, and you need to have a roof over your head. And if that means you flip burgers, you flip burgers. It's okay. There's no shame in working. You don't have to be. You don't have to edit for a living for your full income immediately. You'd like to. We would all like to. But it takes time to build up a business. And so you do what you have to do. If what you have to do is take a job you don't really like, and you can suffer through it and cash the check, then you do that. But I'm in favor of doing work you like doing. And if you don't like doing inappropriate work for an inappropriate manuscript, you just turn it down, let somebody else do it. You know, it's not worth dying over. None of this is.
It can be definitely a challenge. I've taken jobs I wasn't thrilled with because I needed the paycheck, but I had to learn to draw a line in the sand if somebody was being abusive to me and be like, no, I'm just not going to take this one. I will live on ramen this month.
Yeah, you have to be able to, you know, you have to have a cancellation clause in your contract that says, you know what, I'm pulling it. I'm not finishing this job because you're being abusive, you're being manipulative, you're gaslighting me. I'm out of here. You have to be able to do that because, you know, you may have to borrow some money from your, you know, from your cousin to get through the next month, but you do what you have to do.
Sometimes the mental health benefits are worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think now it's actually time. So.
Okay. All righty. Well, it's been lovely. And if anybody has any issues or questions or whatever, you can email me. I'm easy to find.